the focus, as you know, for today's session is all around digitisation. And over the past few meetings, well, for a long time, Brian and Sheila and Joan have all been sort of telling us the fantastic work that's been going on at Heritage Quay. And as Angie says, they've been working closely with Julia Lee on the Women in Rugby League project as well. And they have other sporting collections. And then, Becky, we had a chat, probably almost, it might almost be 6 months ago now, mightn't it? It's been a long time in the coming, hasn't it? Yeah, with yourself and Fran. And we put this date in the diary for Becky to come in from that heritage organisation side to talk about how they work with NHAG and the netball group and with other groups, and just sort of give you sort of an overview of how the digitisation works from an archive point of view. So Becky, can I hand over to you?
You can, I'll share my screen, but just say before that, thanks everyone. That's been so interesting listening to all the updates, and even if it doesn't feel like you're doing very much, you're doing so much. It really is brilliant to hear, and you all seem on the right track as well, which is really great. So I am going to hopefully share my screen. Can you all see the first slide? Fantastic. So if any of you listen to the kind of sporting heritage webinars, you'll have heard the first little bit about Heritage Quay, because I'm just going to talk a little bit about through a little bit about what we do, and then I'll get on to the key points about digitisation. So we do lots here at Heritage Quay. So we're based at University of Huddersfield. We have archives, we have exhibition space, we undertake digital preservation, we do lots of public engagement activities. And hopefully you all know what archives are, because it sounds like you're working with kind of historical records or kind of objects and memorabilia, but they're effectively collections of physical or digital documents or records which have been selected for permanent preservation because of their value as evidence or as a source for historical or other research. We're a bit different at Heritage Quay in that we don't just take archives per se, and archives are often kind of paper or digital records. We have lots of objects, we've got books, printed documents or printed books, lots of things that maybe a traditional archive wouldn't take, but that you might expect to find in maybe a museum or a library. So we've got a lot of different mixed collections here at Heritage Quay. So we collect around 7 themes. One of our really major areas of collecting is sport. So as you will all know, we have, just check by the way, is the screen, is it moving through the different slides as I'm clicking through them? Fantastic. So sport, we have England Netball's collection. I work very closely with Brian and Sheila and Joan and all the other members of NHAG on their collection. We also have the Rugby Football League's collection, and we've recently added to that through the Women in Rugby League project, which has been mentioned by Angie and Fran, which has been led by Julia Lee and was NLHF funded. We also look after World Netball's archive, and then we've also got some other cricket collections as well. So lots of sporting collections, as well as lots of music collections, politics, local papers of local MPs, local Labour Party collections. We've got the university's own archive, lots of theatre and performance collections, including Sir Patrick Stewart's archive here, art and design. We have lots of local artists collections, and we've got various fabric collections that have come to us kind of via the university. And then lastly, literature is an area we've just started collecting in, and we've got some really fantastic Ted Hughes related collections. So we've got, really very broad collecting areas, and they keep us very busy, and lots going on. So how do we provide access to the archives? Well, we have an online catalogue, heritagequay.org/archives. So we catalogue all of this, kind of the collections, we have a priority list because, like any archive, we've got a big backlog of what we need to catalogue, because we take collections in, and then with the pandemic, that's put us a bit further behind because we didn't have any on-site access. And so once we kind of catalogue a collection, we add it to our online catalogue, and then we also add it, we're starting to add things to National Archives Discovery, which is a national search engine, and likewise Archives Hub, which is more for kind of research institutions. Archives Hub, anything on Archives Hub goes out to Europeana, which is a European archive search engine. So it's all about, cataloging is all about increasing accessibility of our collections, and our collections also display on our own university's library website as well. What else do we do? Well, if you ever came to visit us at Heritage Quay, we're on level 3 of the Schwann building. You'll be greeted with our exhibition area. We've got a research room, we've got strong rooms where we store our collections. We've got a big curvy screen where you can have a go and kind of look at images and digitized items from some of the collections, effectively act as a conductor. At the moment, we have an exhibition all about music, our music collections. This year is Kirklees Year of Music, and so we've got 6 planned exhibitions all around our different music collections, and we're well renowned actually for our music collections as we are for our sport collections. So that's our kind of public engagement focus this year. And we'll be having various events that happen related to those talks and conferences and other things going on. We do lots of work with students and volunteers. So we've got examples of students there working with their collections. And the top right-hand side is actually some of the Women in Rugby League volunteers having the very same talk about what are archives. And then something else that we undertake is digital preservation. So we have over 300,000 files. 5.9 terabytes of data is wrong. It's actually now 7.5. England Netball can be blamed for much of the increase in our data storage, as I will get onto shortly. I say that with a very tongue-in-cheek. Brian, Sheila and I have a very good working relationship, I would say. So we've got over 100 different types of file formats. Some of our biggest collections are the university's own collection, the British Music Collection, British Dance Bands Collection, both of those are music collections, and the Micron Theatre Company, which is a touring canal-based theatre company. So again, the figures there actually are probably slightly out of date now in terms of how many hours of audio we have. And how we know this is we have a program called Tree Size, which analyzes all of our digital file formats, can tell us exactly how many formats we have, the size of them and things like that. And I would really recommend, I think you can get free trials of it. There is a small ongoing cost for it. But if you have digital formats, any digital files, it's a really great tool for analysis. It tells you exactly what you have. So public engagement, I've already mentioned this a little bit already, but we do lots of different engagement activities, have people in, kind of open up the archives. This is in addition to our regular research room opening hours, which are open, the research room is open for people to come look at the collections Mondays, Tuesdays, and we're trialing on Fridays for 6 months to try and get hopefully more people in post-pandemic. But yeah, we offer lots of kind of different events around with the public and students and staff and academics at the university. And then we're on social media, so we have Instagram accounts, we're on Twitter, we are on Facebook. Sorry, I was like, I know there's another one. Not yet made it to TikTok. That might be a future area to develop, but we're already doing so much that it might be a little bit too much to extend our staff resource to social media. And as I've mentioned, we have lots of exhibitions. So actually you can see here just a variety of the different items that we exhibit. And last year, actually, the end of last year, we had an exhibition all about the rugby league collections here, and that featured the men's game, women's game, and wheelchair rugby on display together for the first time to coincide with the World Cup. Just to mention, our exhibition space is open 6 days a week. So it's open Monday to Friday, 8 AM till 7 PM. and it's open Saturday 9 till 5. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about England netball, because obviously Brian and Sheila are here, and I think they'd be very disappointed if I hadn't mentioned their collections. So England netball was deposited with us in 2017. It's over 24 metres of records, documents the history of netball in England. It includes all sorts of different documents, from meeting minutes, reports, score sheets, magazines, handbooks, programmes, rules, press cuttings, press releases, scrapbooks, uniforms, trophies, recordings. There's lots and lots of different items in there, and I'm sure this probably reflects some of the sorts of material you've got in your own heritage collections too. So we work really closely with Brian, Sheila and NHAG to ensure the continued transfer of material to the archive. And obviously we've just spoken, Brian's updated everyone on SharePoint, and the hope to transfer kind of some of that digital material that England Netball are now creating over to us. The priorities for us are to continue cataloguing the archive, and all that work is undertaken by Brian and Sheila, and they do a really, really fantastic job on that. And we're so grateful for their support, because it wouldn't be anywhere near as accessible as it is without their help and support. We're working with England Netball and NHAG to raise the profile of the archive for the centenary in 2026. And we are, I think the priorities, I think as well, as they complete, I think continue cataloguing and the digitisation of priority items in the collection. And hopefully that aligns with what Brian and Sheila think too. And just thought, hopefully that will lead nicely on to digitisation, which is what I am here to talk about. And just what have been the priorities for digitisation for NHAG and England Netball? I think some of the key priorities have been some of that really at-risk material. So things like film reels, VHS, which are just no longer really easily playable. It's so often the case that we take in material that, you know, is very common and is really regularly used by everyone, and a few years later it becomes obsolete and is no longer used. So it's been really important for England Netball, and they identified this actually before I was involved, that these needed, and NHAG identified that these needed to be digitised because they were at risk on the media that they were on. Another priority for digitisation has been some of the early netball magazines, and this has been undertaken by Townsweb, as Brian's mentioned, and also kind of slides, negatives and photographs, and that work has the digitisation of those has been undertaken, I think, at home by Brian and Sheila. And all of those are available via the Our Netball history website. So just to think a little bit more broadly about digitisation, so what are the benefits of digitisation? One of the main benefits is increased accessibility and discoverability of the items, of heritage items. And I hope that this will open up. Has that opened on your screen? The link to the...
No.
You'll need to refresh the share for it to jump into another screen. So if you go into your share button, it will say either refresh or second share, and then that should take you to wherever, because you can probably see it at your end, but I don't think you can see it at this end.
Brilliant. Thanks. This is one that I'm not used to using Zoom. It's worth saying we use Teams all the time. So can you now see this? Brilliant. So this is just one example of increased accessibility and discoverability. This is from our British Dance Bands collection. Hopefully it's about to start playing. Anyway, I'll stop it there. But our British Dance Band collection has over 10,000 records of British dance band music, and these are digitised by the depositor Charles Hippersley Cox, who's actually in today working on his collection, and we then ingest them and add them to our website. And these are by far our most popular collection online, closely followed by Rugby League, and they are listened to all over the world. And when we undertake analysis of our website. So again, that's just one of those increased accessibility and discoverability shows the benefits that digitisation can have. And I am hopefully, I'll go back to the, oh, sorry, go back to the PowerPoint. This is where I'm gonna reshare my screen again. Sorry about that. There we go. Hopefully back. Yeah. So from that perspective, it's been a real success. And one of the conditions of that deposit was that the files needed to be digitized before they came to us, so we could make them accessible via the website. The other benefits are the long-term preservation and safeguarding of collections in at-risk formats. So what I haven't mentioned about the British Dance Band collection is that all of those records are on shellac, which is not very easily, you can see an example there. We wouldn't want to be playing those records in the archive. Although we have facilities to play vinyl and digitize vinyl, we don't have the ability to play or digitize shellac. So actually having those records digitized is the best possible outcome for us and for the preservation of that item, so you're not constantly handling it and playing it and then therefore making it more at risk. So those are some of the benefits. And now, what are the things to consider around digitization? So there's a really big list here. Don't let it put you off, I would say. But just a couple of things that that kind of we've been thinking, or that we would always think about. So why are you digitizing? Why are you digitizing, or why are you thinking of digitizing your collection or items from your collection? Is it due to file format? Is it because they're at risk? Is it just because you think you should, because everyone else seems to be doing it? And I would say bear that in mind for future points that we'll come to. Who are you digitizing for? Who are your audiences? Is it just for internal use? Is it just for your members? Are you planning to make any digitized copies available to a wider audience? And if so, how are you going to make those copies available? What will you digitize? And be very strategic about this. You cannot digitize everything as much as you might want to. There are good reasons not to digitize everything, which I will get onto when we discuss some of the other points on here. Who will undertake the digitization? Now, this is really important. Is it going to be, are you going to undertake the digitization in-house? Is it going to be you who's doing this? Is it going to be an external company? If it's in-house digitization, what equipment do you have? Or what equipment will you need to buy? What training is going to be needed and provided to yourself or whoever else might be doing this? These are all things to think about. Do you have permission to digitize? Now, this is really important. Do you own the collection? Has it been deposited with you by someone? So we have here at Heritage Quay collections which are deposited, which means that we look after it on behalf of someone else. They retain ownership. So for instance, England Netball's collection is owned by England Netball. We don't own it. Or we have collections which are donated to us whereby we have that ownership of the collection, because you might need to double check with whoever owns the collection about whether you can digitize it. And that's also separate to copyright, and copyright is something that you really need to consider when digitizing. If you're looking to digitize, the item's probably going to be in copyright depending on the age of it. So you're probably going to need to seek permission from the copyright holder if you intend on making it publicly available. There is an exception in the copyright law or Copyright Act for making for archives to make preservation copies of documents or files. So there is an exception for us, but does that apply? to you. And just in terms of copyright and permissions, it takes forever. Leave a lot of time to get those permissions. It will always take longer than you think. And if you can't find the copyright holder, if it is in copyright, there's lots of guidance online about copyright, by the way, then you might need to apply for what's known as an orphan works license, which is offered by the UK government. And again, that takes time and there's a small cost to that. And then are there any other implications of digitizing something? For instance, what about GDPR and any kind of legal implications of digitization? So for instance, with photographs and the right to be forgotten, if you're going to make something, digitize it and make it publicly available, be prepared that you might get given a takedown notice, for instance, by somebody who doesn't want their picture to be available online. So there's lots, and I'm not trying to scare you, it's just that you really need to be thinking about all of these things if you're going to undertake a digitization project. Again, come back to that point of how are you going to make your kind of digital files available? Is it just going to be in-house on Windows Explorer just for your own purposes? Are you thinking you're going to make them publicly available? If so, is it going to be via a website? How will you keep that website up to date? Websites go out of date so quickly. Our website, which I showed you briefly, is looking really out of date, and we're working on upgrading that now. But just be aware of that sort of thing. Or are you going to maybe not make it available on the website, but say people can come in and look at it on like a desktop or whatever, in wherever you're based? So all these sorts of things are worth considering. What format will your digital files be? Now, again, this is really important. So when we create digital or digitize anything, we generally create both an access and a preservation copy. And the preservation copy is kind of a long-term copy that will be kept forever. It's normally a much larger file size. For instance, it could be a WAV for a sound file, or the access copy would be MP3. With some of the England netball digitization that's happened, for instance, the films and VHS have been digitized as MOV files as the long-term preservation copy, and MP4 as the access copy. So the preservation copy you wouldn't touch effectively, but the access copy is a much smaller file and could perhaps will be made available via our website. But again, it's just things to think about. There's lots of guidance out there on kind of what type of format your digital files, or if you're undertaking a digitization, what are the best long-term formats for digitization. And it's worth saying that you might want to consider maybe choosing a couple and saying we'll focus on these, because otherwise, like us, we've got over 100 different file formats. Now, not all of those are from digitization, they're files that have been given to us, but it's really worth thinking about this quite early on, because obviously that's unsustainable for us. And a lot of those files we can't open. So, but that leads into digital preservation, which is kind of a sort of whole nother topic. Although just to mention briefly about that, say you've digitized your file, how are you going to preserve that for the long term? Because just like I've given the examples, with VHS and film, that you can't, it can be very difficult to play those now. Same with digital file formats. Digital file formats degrade over time as well, and it's really important to undertake checks on them to make sure that they are still accessible and can still open and play and all the rest in the future. So that's just really worth thinking about. I've put metadata down. So archivists love metadata. So this is all of that kind of extra information or data about data. So when we're cataloging, it's that information about what's the name of the file, what is how big is it, how many files are there, what does the file tell me, what is on it, that kind of description about the file, what year was it created, all of that sort of information. Now, this is really important anyway. If you're undertaking a digitisation project, you're going to want a list of everything that you're going to digitise, but you're also going to want to capture information about that digitisation process. That's just as important. So, and possibly make that information available to researchers as well. Again, in terms of metadata, that information can be really useful for researchers, but also say you need to, there's any issues perhaps with kind of the digitisation, and you need to, sorry, what am I trying to say? If you don't have that metadata, then you might not be able to identify, what an image is, for instance, if you're digitising a photograph, or you might not be able to identify what the film you've digitised is. You need to have that list, and you need to be able to then match that up with whatever's been digitised, because otherwise, kind of what's the point? You're just gonna, if something happens to you and you're not around, or maybe whoever's working on the project isn't around, how are you going to know what that file is, what that kind of image is, what that sound recording is? That's all of that's really important to be able to match this up. And then costs, and I put this in capital letters and bold because digitisation isn't cheap. It's not easy, a nice, easy, will fix everything solution. The storage of digital material can be really expensive, particularly when you're getting into, like us, terabytes of data. It depends very much on the quantity and type of files you're storing. Who's going to pay for that storage? Is there kind of enough space on your organization's servers, or to do that? Are you going to keep it on, say, I don't know, OneDrive, or any of those sorts of cloud-based storage? But again, it's worth saying that those aren't preservation systems. They're not going to make these files available in 20, 30 years time to open. They're simply storage solutions. The costs of undertaking digitisation, so buying equipment if you're going to undertake this in-house, the costs of training, the external costs of going out to a specialist provider, the costs of resources, so kind of staff time, volunteer time, and even volunteers cost money, for tea, biscuits, coffee, which Sheila, it must be said, normally provides to all of us when Sheila comes up, which we're very grateful, brings us some biscuits. But yeah, so there's lots and lots of costs involved. And as I'm sure Brian and Sheila can tell you, this is something that we are all too aware of with the size of the England Netwall digital archive. So a couple of other digitisation tips and tricks. Plan your project. This is really important. Plan. Have a timeline in place. Be prepared for that timeline to change, because it will change, because things will always take longer than you expect. Plan in terms of those questions that I pose. Why are you digitising? Who for? That strategy, who's going to undertake it? Make sure that's all worked into your plan. Seek advice from people with expertise or professionals, and utilize networks that might support the project. I think that's really important. So there's lots of advice out there online, but then there's also, lots of organizations who can help with this, and lots of kind of people like myself or archives who will quite willingly normally give their time to speak to you, to go through this sort of process. Get buy-in from stakeholders in your organization. That should probably be at the top, to be honest. That's really important. There's no point in kind of getting your perfect project together only to find that there's actually no appetite for it anywhere within your organization. And again, in terms of costs, thinking about funding bids for digitisation. So one Townsweb, who are a digitisation organisation, offer a kind of yearly competition that you can enter and apply for funding for digitisation, and it's really popular. Again, there's too many people applying for the pots available, but it's well worth considering getting some external funding out there. And so there's lots and lots of resources available online about undertaking digitisation. Some really great ones are Townsweb, who obviously I've mentioned, who kind of have that annual sort of competition for funding. They've got so many resources on there. I would really, their website would be my kind of go-to starting point if you're looking at undertaking digitisation. There's also lots of guides from, archives and libraries. So University of Westminster Library Guide, Why Don't Archivists Digitise Everything, is a particular favourite of mine. And it's something we regularly get asked, why can't I just see a digital copy of this? The Norfolk Archives Digitisation Guide. I'll send my slides over as well to Fran to share out afterwards, so you can access these. And the Culture Hive Digital Heritage Hub website has lots of articles on, like, where do I start with creating a digital archive? It's got, I'm a small sized heritage organisation, how do I plan for digitisation? And same with, a medium size. They're quite, again, very, very similar articles, because effectively it's the same no matter what size organisation you are. And then that is it from me. Thank you for letting me talk about this. I am very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Hopefully I've not scared you all at the prospect of digitisation, because it is a really great thing. I think it's just, it needs thought and it needs planning, and it's not something you can just jump into, would be probably my best advice. So thanks.
Thanks, Becky. That's been really good. I've been trying to keep up with you, posting links in the chat to everything and anything you've mentioned. So I'm just going to put the Norfolk one in there, and I put in some favourites of mine as well. So so hopefully there's a good raft